Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to class. Today we are going to talk about a very interesting and significant concept in linguistics called bilingualism. A very complex phenomenon where we'll talk about this category called compound, coordinate and subordinate bilingualism. Okay, let us take an example. So, suppose a Tamil speaking family moves to Delhi, which is dominantly a Hindi speaking society. And let us look at the composition of the family. So, there you have parents who are adults and two kids. Let's say a girl of the age, let's say 2.5 or 3, and a boy of an age of, let's say 7 or 8 years or 9 years old. So, this is the composition where you have parents, father and mother who are above 30 or 25, minimum 25 plus. Then a girl child who is around 2.5 years old. Then a boy in the family who is around 8 or 9 years of age. So, they are native speakers of Tamil. So, Tamil speaking family. It moves to Delhi, settles in Delhi. And now let us look at the linguistic profile. What will happen? So, parents who are Tamil speakers and also use English as lingua franca. So, they go to Delhi with the family, they settle down there. Now, the kids also settle in the same speech community, same linguistic environment. What will happen to them? And let us look at the linguistic profile before shifting and after shifting, settling there. Do you think the learning of Hindi, right? So, do you think the learning of Hindi by this family will be similar? If you look at all the 4 members of the family individually, will learning be the same for these 4, or will there be a difference? If there is a difference, then what is the difference? If you understand this phenomena of learning, let's say Hindi in Delhi, then you will be able to understand compound, coordinate and subordinate bilinguals. So, look at this youngest member of the family, this little child, the girl child. Now, she has acquired her mother tongue, that is Tamil, partially, but the acquisition of Tamil is still not complete. So, she is in the process of acquiring her first language, her mother tongue, and then she is exposed to Hindi as L2. So, she is in the process of acquiring L1 and has partially acquired L1, and then she has been exposed to L2, that is Hindi. So, imagine the early bilingualism where this girl child had access to 2 distinct linguistic codes simultaneously. However, Tamil precedes, but not to a great degree. She is still in the process of acquiring first language, and she has partially acquired it, and she is in the process of completing her learning in first. Meanwhile, she is exposed to L2, Hindi. So, she will learn Hindi like a native child, native speaker, because she has not crossed the critical period of learning, language learning, right? And she will acquire Tamil and Hindi with equal ease. So for her, there will be hardly any difference because she will acquire Hindi like a Hindi native speaker, right? So her competence in both the languages, L1 and L2, will be like native like competence. She will develop native like intuition, right? So she will have equal access, ease and competence in L1, which is Tamil, and L2, which is Hindi. So she will have two codes, but the understanding or the pragmatic aspect of her learning or the semantic field will be one. So she will use two different structures for the same meaning. That's the beauty of her age and advantage. Then let us look at this boy who has already learned Tamil as mother tongue. The acquisition of mother tongue is complete by the time he shifts to Delhi with the family and he is exposed to Hindi. So he goes to school, he has exposure to Hindi in school, on the street, in the neighborhood, or possibly if there is a domestic help, Hindi speaking domestic help. So both these children have exposure to Hindi as well at home. But the learning of Hindi, right, between the girl child and the boy child will not be the same. The girl child acquires Hindi as native speaker, but the boy will have successive understanding or learning. That means learning of Tamil as language 1 is complete, and then the child is exposed to L2, learning of the second language. So the boy will learn language still easier, effortlessly, but not effortlessly the way the girl learns. So his learning will have certain restrictions like native like competence and intuition. So boy will have learnt Hindi L2 to a great degree, where the boy will not have problem in using Hindi as second language. Boy will be able to use, understand and sustain and meet all linguistic demands in Hindi. But the competence level will not be the same compared to his sibling, the 2.5-year-old girl. Then let us look at the parents. What will happen to them? Right. They will have limited access to Hindi, right? Because they have already crossed the age of critical period, right? Their learning of mother tongue is complete, and they will use Hindi as a second language only in restricted domains, because their learning will be limited to their needs, based on their needs, motivation and needs. And then their mother tongue, like Tamil, will always be dominantly interfering in their learning, and the dominantly controlling their learning Hindi, second language. So now we have three conditions, three states. Number 1, the girl child. Number 2, the boy. And number 3, the parents. All the three conditions are manifested and reflected in terms of compound, coordinate and subordinate bilingualism. So for the girl child, it is compound bilingualism, where she will have to access to the structures and the meanings in both the languages with equal ease. So she will have one semantic system and two codes. So she can use two different structures for one meaning. Opposed to that girl's competence, we have the boy who has access to both the languages with comfortable ease, but he has better understanding in his mother tongue, but no less in the other tongue like Hindi. So he belongs to that coordinate bilingual category. And the parents who have limited access and where their L2 understanding and learning of L2 is dominated and controlled by their L1, they belong to that subordinate bilingual category. So, if you look at compound bilingualism, compound bilinguals, right, they have two sets of linguistic codes. Two sets of linguistic codes are stored with one meaning unit. So, single semantic system. That means they have one system of meaning for words which is used in both L1 and L2. So, they can have one concept and two reference, one concept, one meaning and two structures, one meaning and two words. So, concepts, they have unified concept, but they have two structures for that to represent that. So, they have two different codes, two linguistic codes, let us say L1 and L2 structurally for with one single semantic system. That means the concepts will be the same. So, for the same concept, they can easily represent the same concept in two different structures without any problem. So, you cannot separate their understanding of L1 and L2. This is compound bilingualism. Whereas, in coordinate bilingualism, each linguistic code is stored and organized separately, right? And they have two meaning units and two systems of meaning for words, right? So, there is certain overlap, they are not completely different and disjoint, there is certain overlap. And if you look at this picture, representation, they have semantic system 1 of L1 and semantic system 2 for L2. So, they have two separate codes and two separate semantic systems with little overlap, right. So, one system of meaning is for words that the individuals know in L1 and the other is for words they know in L2. So, they will have two different semantic systems. So, you can identify and you can distinguish. So, in compound there is one semantic system, one meaning system. In coordinate you have two meaning systems, one which you know in L1 and also L2 for other words other than what you know in L1, for other words you have L2. So, they have two distinct systems, right, of structures and meaning. So, that is the difference between compound and coordinate bilingualism, where in compound bilingualism L1 and L2 two codes are available to the user with one semantic system, one meaning system. But in coordinate bilingualism you have two codes available to the user, L1 and L2 and two semantic systems. In subordinate bilingualism, subordinate bilinguals, right, the second language L2 is assumed to be understood and interpreted through the first language. So, first language essentially dominates the understanding and use of second language, right. The case of parents, you can imagine. Such speakers possess two sets of linguistic codes and only one meaning unit, but not like compound. They have restrictions, limitations. So, they have one system, L1 semantic system, and they hardly have anything in L2. So whatever interpretations and use they do in terms of the resources available in L1. So L1 becomes their primary source of understanding and interpreting. But it is not like compound bilingualism, where also they have one semantic unit. Their understanding in L2 and L1 is not restricted. So they have equal ease, competence, and absolutely no language dominate the other. But here, your L2 is strongly dominated and controlled by your learning in L1. You have limited access to L2. Look at the case of parents. How much Hindi they will learn? To what extent? Right? They will learn Hindi only to that much which is essential for them to survive. So going to market, going to street, buying vegetables, talking to the domestic help, it's a very limited access. But the boy, he has to interact in the school, he has to survive, his learning style will be different. The girl, she is like native speaker, right? So that is compound, coordinate and subordinate bilingualism. Moving on, we move to the another category called additive bilinguals and subtractive bilinguals. Additive bilingualism and subtractive bilingualism. So we move to another category, additive bilinguals and subtractive bilinguals, or additive bilingualism and subtractive bilingualism. How do we understand that? What does it mean? So depending on how one's L2 influences the retention of one's L1. So what is the impact of learning second language on first language, right? If it adds to your understanding and knowing of language 1, right, that is called additive bilingual or additive bilingualism. But if one language has to pay price for learning the second language, then it is subtractive. So what do you mean by paying price? Right? If one language dominates, takes over, and the user gets hardly any chance to use the second language or the L1 because of multiple social and linguistic factors, possibly the social conditions or the cultural setting doesn't allow you. It happens with majority, in majority of the cases it happens with speakers of minor languages. They have to learn a dominant language at the cost of their own language. So additive and subtractive bilingualism, depending on how one's L2, the language 2 or the second language, influences the retention of L1, right? So bilinguals who can improve their L2 without losing their L1 proficiency are called additive bilinguals. Why? Because they are adding another linguistic resource to already existing their mother tongue, right? L1. So L2 is an addition to L1. It doesn't diminish, curtail or control your L1. It is an addition to L1. So as a user, you have an additional linguistic resource, right? Access to an additional linguistic resource, and the L2 does not demand on L1. So you are adding another language, right? So this is additive. But those whose L2 is required or learned at the cost of their L1 can be called subtractive bilingual. That means the learning of L2 has bearing on L1 and it restricts, diminishes the use of it, your the functional domain of it, and it takes over. Then you are subtracting L1 from L2, right? So you are not a balanced bilingual, and the situation doesn't allow you to be a balanced one, right? So for being additive bilinguals, both the languages learned by individuals should be valued in the society in which they live. See, always remember why we lose our language, because one language may be dominant and controlling the other language. So socially, politically, contextually, one language enjoys primacy over the other language. So even if you know both the languages, you have limitations of usage of it, because you don't get opportunities to use outside your personal domains. And this linguistic status and stratification forces us to be a subtractive bilingual, where L1 may not enjoy the similar status, equal status in society or the community or the speech community where you are using it, and they do not have equal status. So language with a higher prestige value will take over the language on the lower or inferior prestige value. So in that case, you become subtractive bilingual, where your learning and use of L2 completely dominates your understanding and use of L1, right? Subtractive bilingualism occurs when learning and L2 or a second language interferes the L1 learning, and consequently, L1 is replaced by L2. And it has happened to many of the societies, like let's say Bhojpuri and Hindi for that matter, let's say Bhojpuri and Bajika for that matter, Hindi and Bajika. So Hindi has taken over, because Hindi gives you upward mobility opportunity. Hindi enjoys primacy, prestige value compared to Bhojpuri. So even if that Bhojpuri speech community is bilingual, but Hindi takes over, right? It may not be a good example where Hindi has completely replaced Bhojpuri, but of course Hindi controls, right? So gradually, in this case, the competence and mastery of L1 diminishes. So your mastery in your native language will diminish, because you have already learnt L2, and mastery and competence of L2 is usually increase and dominate, right? So while the proficiency and mastery of L2 augments, it dominates, right? So this is subtractive. Additive, when you learn another language which enjoys equal importance, which has equal opportunities outside your personal domain. So the linguistic status of L1 and L2 are almost similar, at least not discriminatory, at least not L2 is not subordinate or L1 is not subordinate to L2 or L1, right? So there is no subordinate and superordinate relationship. In that case, when you learn two languages, you are additive bilingual, because you have added one more linguistic resource to your already existing native linguistic resource. But the cases where your mother tongue has no prestige value compared to the other language that you are learning or you have learned, with the L2 completely takes over L1, then gradually your mastery and proficiency will diminish, and the mastery and proficiency in L2 will augment. So in one case where you have equal mastery and proficiency plus equal social value attached to both the codes, then this is called additive bilingualism, where you have access to two linguistic resources and both are respected, enjoy importance, significance in the society, and they have equal status, social status. But if the case where L2 takes over the L1 because of multiple social and linguistic reasons, then your mastery and proficiency in L1 will diminish and your mastery and proficiency in L2 will augment because of the higher social value attached to it. You tend to use, tend to learn, tend to understand L2 better than L1. So it is not adding to your verbal repertoire. It is subtracting from your mother tongue, right? And that is why you are a subtractive, this phenomenon is subtractive bilingualism. So that is the difference between additive and subtractive bilingualism. Moving on, we have folk and elite bilingualism. And what does it mean? So folk and elite bilingualism are distinguished in terms of variables like cultural identity, linguistic and social variables, right? There are multiple factors, like social factors, cultural factors, linguistic factors, identity, issues of identity, right? And it happens because of multiple socio-political reasons. So depending on the social status of language, not the speakers, the social status of language, how one language enjoys primacy over the other. It happens in society where you have linguistic hegemony, where one language dominates the rest of the languages, right? In such cases, they can be classified into folk and elite bilinguals. Now, folk bilinguals belong to minor language speech community. Don't go by the literal meaning of the word folk and elite. Broadly, it corresponds to the same distinction, but it does not literally mean what we mean in sociology. Folk and elite bilingualism refers to the status of mastery and proficiency according to the linguistic demands and use, right, in the society. So, folk bilingualism belongs to minor language speech community. What does it mean? Minor language speech community means the language does not enjoy primacy and status compared to language X, which is there spoken in the society. So, one language may be the status of language may be inferior to the dominant language. So, in that case, right, it is predominantly L2 will control, right? L2 will dominate. So, it happens in those societies where a minor language speech is minor language, it does not have prestige value and high status in the predominant language society or language community in which you live, right? In contrast, elite bilinguals speak a dominant language in a given society and they can speak another language which provides them added advantage, value and benefits within the society. So, that means they are the native speakers of dominant language. They are not the native speaker of minor language in the society. They are speakers of a dominant language and they have another language or another minor language as an additional advantage to have access to other linguistic social resources, cultural resources. So, let us say language 1, language A spoken by a very small population of the society, and that society is a bilingual society, and everyone speaks two languages. But those speakers who speak L1 have lower social status and lower social prestige attached to L1 compared to the speakers who speak L2, which is the dominant language of the society, and they also have access to L1. And so we have two sets of native speakers. Native speaker 1, whose native language is L1, and native speaker 2, whose language is L2, native language is L2. But interestingly, L2 is the dominant language. So that means they are the native speakers of a dominant language, socio-politically dominant language. But they have access to L1 as well. So the status will be different, right? The status of L1 as native speakers and a status of L1 as second language speaker, right? It will be different because the native speakers of L2 will enjoy primacy and they will dominate the speakers of L1. So L2 will dominate L1. So the folk bilinguals are those who are native speakers of L1. They are speakers of L2, but they have learnt L2 or they have acquired L2 as they live in a society where L2 is predominantly important, socio-politically important. So at the cost of their L1. So they are folk bilinguals. But look at the other class or other case where you are native speaker of L2, which is the dominant predominant language of the society, and you also know L1, right? So you are elite bilingual. So you are elite bilingual. So folk and elite bilingualism, right? So we have so far learnt many categories, and they are all overlapping categories. When we say categories, different researchers have suggested these categories, but there are a lot of overlaps. These categories are not linear in nature, that this category ends here, another category begins here. There are overlaps. So it's a very complex phenomena where bilingualism is a very complex phenomena where a single user has access and ability to use two languages in a given context, depending on the mastery and proficiency and degree of their proficiency, depending on the background of their learning, depending on the manner in which they acquire, depending on their ability to use and the degree of use. We have these categories, but these are all broad categories. They are not restricted and very rigid categories. We have overlaps, but we need to understand broadly such phenomena and these categories, right? So bilingualism or multilingualism, it entails a series of other linguistic phenomena, right? And it has a lot of implications. And we have been talking about such phenomena and implications as well. Like you might have heard diglossia, social bilingualism, right? Diglossia, where two languages exist, but it is according to the use of it. The user has equal access to these two languages, but based on the use of it, right? We term it diglossia. It's a bilingual situation where one language is restricted to a particular domain and the domains are different, right? Issues like linguistic attitude, right? Issues like language and identity issues, right? Bilingual or multilinguals, and how do they have advantages? languages are used to express solidarity. And you might have heard this William Lebow's great work, initial works, one of the initial works, this Martha Vineyard Island study. Right? So, identity issues it entails. Then phenomena like code mixing and code switching. Why do we mix two codes in a single sentence, or sometimes we switch over from code 1 to code 2? It's a bilingual phenomena, multilingual phenomena. It has implications in early education, right? It has implications on our cognitive development. It has implications in our social bonding, socialization process, right? It has implications on our cognitive development. It has huge implication of teaching and learning of second language. So, bilingualism is a beautiful phenomena, and it allows users to use from two linguistic resources with ease. It gives a lot of advantage of being bilingual and multilingual, and it has a lot of cognitive advantages. People who are bilinguals, or the kids or children who are bilinguals, have better mathematical abilities, analytical abilities, creative abilities, right? So, bilingualism, and at the same time, at the top of it, bilingualism is a very normal, natural phenomena. It's not something special. It's very common and natural. Being monolingual is now questioned. It's uncommon, and now theoretically we question it, because nobody is monolingual. We all speak one variety of language, a variety of language, but we understand many other varieties of the same dialect. So, dialects, right? We understand the dialects of the same language. We may speak one of the dialects. Right? So, we are all naturally bilingual or multilingual. So, this is it for the day. Thank you very much.